I lived in an apartment complex, and I was selling weed in the apartment complex. The only reason it was illegal back then was because the government couldn't tax it. I was selling marijuana in a conservative state, somewhat Bible Belt to a point, and the cops tried to get me, but I was slick about it. I knew the owner of the apartment complex. I would basically find him people to come in there, so he's cool with what I'm doing. And all the people back then, this is pretty much before internet. You have that dial-up, internet sound.
So you were good for business, man.
I was doing the business in the very beginning, and I hooked up everyone's cable TV in the apartment complex. Everyone's cable TV I hooked up for free of charge. They all knew it was me. Nice. So at this point, the cops on premises, yo, Garry, the cops are here. So I had that covered for a long time. And then 9/11 happened.
Right.
At that point, I'm looking at it, I'm waking up, still living in my parents' house, young kid. And I think I'm watching Die Hard. Then I realize it's, a real thing. I go outside, smoke a blunt, for all the people. And then I hear some stuff like, oh, Flight 11 hit the World Trade Center. And I'm like, what? The Twin Towers look like an 11. Wait a second. Today's the 11th. I'm like, wait, isn't it interesting that the code for emergency is 9/11 in America? Yep. At that point, I was like, And then I remembered the Great War. World War I ended at 11/11 at exactly 11 o'clock. Now I'm like, okay, I don't know what's going on, but someone's doing something.
Yep. Right.
Then here's my journey at that point. This is late 2021. By early 2022, I get in contact with the so-called top numerologists in the world, who are basically all old hags who've been, divorced like fucking 3 times. And I remember asking this one broad, I'm like, Allison, 8's the number of money, right? She's like, yeah. I'm like, well, why do you price your products not in 8s? Why are you pricing your products for 25 and 50? Why don't you do like 80 or 89? 8 plus 9 is 17, 1 is 8. And all of a sudden I get this pause for about 45 seconds. And then the dumb bitch is like, oh, I never thought about that. You've been at this for 40 years and you never thought about that. At that point, I'm like, okay, I'm done with you frauds. I threw away all the books. I threw away everything because I knew numerology is real, but I knew these people didn't have it. Because if you're good at numerology, why are you divorced 3 times? Okay, if you're good at numerology, why the fuck are you broke? Okay, because that's the question I had when I was young.
Right.
Yo, Garry, you're so good at reading people. Why the fuck are you broke? And guess what? It was a valid question. It was a valid question. So, I remember the first time I went up to Mark Cuban. I'm like, you know all this about numerology? Okay, how come you don't have money? Valid question. Now when I talk to him, it's a little bit different. Right. So when it comes down to it, that journey started in 2002 when I started doing things myself. Right. And when I started doing things myself, I started basically asking people birthdays. I see, what's your birthday? What's your birthday? What's your birthday? I started to reverse engineer it. And because I'm reading so many people, I'm picking stuff up that no one else even knows to look for. I'm like, oh, 9s are good at this. They're not humanitarians like the book says. I'm like, wait a second. If 9s are humanitarians, why is Joseph Stalin putting 50 million people in the ground? Right. Doesn't make sense. I start looking all these things. 7's a lucky number. Is it? Why is 7 so lucky? Why is the casino telling you to use it? So obviously it's not so lucky, is it? So
we're in Vegas, bro. You gotta chill with that shit.
Fuck them too. When it comes down to it, I start looking on a daily basis. At all these casinos, and I look at all these other things in the world. I'm like, wait a second, these people are hiding stuff. Right. And then I used to go to cemeteries at night, not doing any voodoo shit or anything like that. Get your heads out your asses. I'm just basically looking at people's birthdays, seeing when they were born, seeing when they died, and seeing if I can reverse engineer what happened. And I keep doing this for years. Right. And obviously, I'm getting really, really good at this. At this point, it's 2004. Right. And I'm like, you know what, man? It's time to start opening my mouth a little bit.
So just to go back. So, all right, 9/11, That happened, and it was kind of this 3-year gestation period for.
Yeah, I'm basically
figuring it out, right?
I'm basically smoking weed by myself in my house, having people come over, selling them stuff, keep the operation going because I can't have a job and actually, try to figure this stuff out. So I had the weed, and I'm not trying to live extravagantly. I think rent was like $500. I'm eating like by myself like $400 worth of food or something like that. Yeah. So I'm not balling at any way whatsoever. I'm just studying 6-7 hours a day. Wake up. Okay, this doesn't work. This doesn't work. This doesn't work. So reverse engineer, and I did that for a good 3 years.
Right.
And by the way, I didn't know how to talk to people like this. This didn't come naturally. This is something I had to work at. Yep. How to articulate your words, how to get people into this information. And then I started calling radio stations locally in 2004, and I hooked up with a guy named Mike Trevisano. Mike Trevisano was the top guy in Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay.
And this, the internet still wasn't big back then. Rogan wasn't anybody back then. He was the top guy in Cleveland. And he would have me on. I would call in the radio station, and then he eventually started having me on all the time. So I'm like
live in studio.
Oh yeah, live in studio. So I used to come in the. He started having me live in studio for the first time around 2006. Okay. Around that area, and at this point, I'm so different from everyone else. People are calling in with their birthdays. I'm giving their readings. The stuff's still on YouTube. You guys can look it up. Yeah, this is all raw shit from 20 years ago. And people are, basically, if you think people are calling me a fraud now, you should have seen the shit. You should see the shit back then. So
was it because of they were more religious? Because in Spanish culture, numerology. I wouldn't say numerology. I say astrology and tarot cards is kind of that's really perceived in the Latino community as demon shit.
Yeah, of course.
So was it that angle with
No, this is just a fraud, steak oil
shut
sales.
up, this.
Shut the fuck up, all this stuff. And then I started making predictions. And then I said someone will win the NBA Finals in 2005, 2006, 2007, and then I did something unprecedented. In 2007, I told everyone the market's going to crash. I started running my mouth. The market's going to crash, and it happened next year.
What gave it away?
Nah.
Wrong, dude. No.
Not happening. No. I might tell you privately.
Okay.
That's not going to be on the air, bro.
I understand.
I'm not giving people the opportunity to reverse engineer 20 years of my work like that.
Right.
But after 2008, the host started giving me a lot of credit because he pulled all his money out.
Oh, wow.
And I saved him probably $500,000.
Yeah.
And he starts saying shit like this. I saved him a lot of money. All of a sudden, a lot of people are getting interested. I have a MySpace back then. People are starting to get a little bit interested in what I'm doing, blah, blah, blah. I started going to restaurants, and people would pay to have a meal and a reading with me. So this is about 2008, 2009. There would 50 people would pay $200 to get a 3-minute reading from me and a little monologue. And so I would literally be here for 5 hours, literally reading fucking 80 people.
Yeah.
And
so it's the super chats.
Boom. Yeah. It's 3 minutes, but this is
$70
in person.
Consultations.
This is in person. And this is when
I get you. Yeah.
This is when I was a cheap whore. You could probably talk to me for $20, $35 and stuff like that. I give you a reading like a gypsy shit.
So 2001. It hits you. Then from there, you kind of wow, this. You're kind of practicing numerology.
About 3 years practice. Then I start calling the radio stations. I become a local celebrity.
How long did that take?
The local celebrity part, probably about 3-4 years because I was on the news
in Ohio.
Yeah, in Ohio. So again, I used to go on the news and all this stuff. All this was facilitated because the top guy liked me.
Yeah,
it flat out, the top guy liked me, man. And I wanted him to like me. I'm not gonna lie about that, man. I wanted him to like me, and his wife fucking loved me.
Oh,
that's where I got him, because his wife was with him, and I gave his wife a reading, and I killed it. And his wife loved me so much. She was in his ear to have me on, and then I kind of grew on the guy. So I kind of did it through a woman.